Lately, I've been developing the water system in my open-world action-adventure game, Sacred Forest, which is available to Wishlist on Steam. One of my biggest goals for Sacred Forest is to create a world in which players can immerse themselves. In order to do that, there's a ton of stuff that has to be added to the game, and many of these features work together in a way that they aren't very noticeable. But if any of them are missing, then it makes the world feel out of place or just totally breaks the immersion. How many games have you played before where you see an ocean or river or pond in the distance, so you run up to it and jump into it, only to find that the water is a fake 2D plane and you just drop to the bottom running underneath it? It totally breaks the immersion, and instead of being in this awesome world, you're transported back to sitting in your kinda smelly chair with all your stacks of Dr. Pepper cans on your desk and too much Dorito dust on your fingies. So what have I done so far in Sacred Forest to try to avoid this problem? Well, I started out with the fake 2D plane that a lot of games have and applied a water shader to it. Nowadays, there are a ton of water shaders online, so I started with a basic one and then heavily modified it until I was happy with the result. I'll probably take another pass at it eventually, but I like the waves and the way it flows down my river systems. The only thing I might do in the future is make the water look like it interacts with the banks of the river and any rocks that are sitting inside of it. From above, the water looks pretty good, but if the camera goes below the surface, it doesn't look at all like you're underwater. To fix that, I wrote a screen space shader for the camera that gets activated when the camera is submerged in water. What's a screen space shader? Well, you can kinda think of it like a lens for your camera. When you put the lens on, it affects what your camera sees, so when the camera dips below the water, it puts a water effect lens on, so everything you see is tinted a watercolor, and it also has a bit of a wave effect and some blur. I also made it so that if the camera is partially submerged, only the part of the screen that is submerged has the effect applied to it. On its own, this is not really enough to sell the effect that the camera is underwater, so I added some fog to make it seem more realistic. And for sound, I added some audio filters to make it sound like you're underwater. There definitely needs to be more decoration and stuff within the water, but I like the way it looks so far. Alright, so all this stuff only affects how the world and camera looks, but the water needs to actually interact with the player. The first thing I set up was some splash effects. For small footstep splashes, I made this part of my footstep emitter, so it emits some water particles from the surface of the water when the character is moving. The footstep emitter also handles sound effects, and since I reuse my footstep emitter all over the place, it works on all my characters, including NPCs. Next up are some bigger splashes, which I added for when the player jumps in and out of water. The sound effects are just some placeholder sounds right now, but you get the idea. The final piece above the surface of the water was to make the water actually interact with the player. This uses some water simulation techniques, which can be a little expensive, so I'll only be using this for stagnant water areas that are deep enough to swim in, like lakes and ponds, and they only get activated when the player is nearby. Speaking of the player, I need some new animations. First up is of course the swimming animation for when the player is in deeper water, so you can swim down below or just on top of the surface. The inspiration for this next animation comes directly from another game. In The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, in Gerudo Valley, there's this one spot in between the canyon where you can dive down into the river below. I always thought this was so cool, so I ended up making a diving animation for my character as well. With the animations done, I added them to my character controller, so now you can transition to a dive when your character is falling, and you can swim around when you enter deeper water. For a final little detail while underwater, I ended up making a bubble effect that just spoops out some bubbles every now and then to simulate the character breathing out as she swims around. I'll eventually use this effect for other decorations and for enemies that you fight underwater. And speaking of fighting, I added a new physics model to my arrows while they're underwater, to give a little bit more challenge to underwater fights since the arrows don't go as far and as fast. And yes, I checked. And apparently shooting arrows with a bow underwater is kind of a thing, at least for one guy on YouTube, which is good enough for me. I guess it's sorta like spearfishing too. Anyway, that's about all there is for water in Sacred Forest, at least for now. I want to say thanks to my patrons, which I post somewhat weekly updates to Patreon. You can also join the Discord and check out the Steam page. Or not. Until next time.